Okay, welcome everyone. It's good to see we've got some good numbers that are attending this morning. So we're here to talk about PFAN and the Pro Bono Financial Advice Network. I'm joined this morning by Nicola Beswick. Nicola is the chair of PFAN, and Nicola's coming to us from her office in Melbourne. We've also got Mel from AFA head office on the line. I'm the WA State Director for the AFA and the AFA's representative on the PFAN board. So over the course of the next hour, we'll take you through a presentation in relation to pro bono advice. And please, if you are wanting to ask any questions, if you can use the Q&A box down the bottom on your screen and not the chat function. Okay. So what is pro bono advice? Nicola?
So pro bono advice, or it's essentially pro bono, is the use of someone's skills in order to help someone utilize those skills that we're trained to do free of charge. And particularly when we look at pro bono financial advice, this is really around a client not incurring any cost for receiving advice, particularly when it comes to their personal financial situation. And that is ultimately something that we're aspiring to do.
And I think, pro bono in itself is, I suppose, referred to a lot in the legal profession, and probably traditionally hasn't been preferred to a lot in the financial services profession. So it's really important that we lift our profession, which is a profession, up to those skills. Now, Nicola, let's say there's an advisor and he charges $2,500 for an advice piece to a client, and he has worked out that it's going to cost him about the raw cost of producing that advice is around about $600. So he's said to the client, look, I'm only going to charge you $500. I'm giving you pro bono advice today. Our normal cost is $2,500. For you today, it's only going to cost $500 because you qualify for pro bono advice. Is that pro bono advice, Nicola?
No, not necessarily, because someone's still getting a cost or paying for the service. It's not entirely free of charge. And if we go back to this key definition or here, where we say the provision of financial advice free of charge to people who, because of financial or social disadvantage, have no alternative access to professional financial advice. I think that if we look at that example, it is very much someone wanting to give back, but still covering their costs from a business sense.
And let's say another example, let's say we had an advisor who, let's say, again, was charging a fee of $2,500 and waives the fee of $2,500, but there is a commission, let's say, for example, on that, it might be a buyback provision of a trauma life component policy, or it might be some other risk situation that the client is going through. So if the advisor is just accepting the commission, which is obviously being paid by a third party, the product manufacturer or through the licensee, and there's no cost to the client, is that regarded as pro bono advice, Nicola?
Well, that's an interesting situation, isn't it? Because the client's not necessarily paying for that advice or paying for that aspect, but it is intertwined from a commission perspective. And I think this is where another conversation around how the insurance space and the advice space works. In that example, it's a good one to debate, I think. And I'd imagine there's a lot of different schools of thought out there for that.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I think it comes back to that no cost. The client shouldn't be incurring a cost in terms of that eligibility fact. So I think
Exactly.
as an advisor, I think if the advisor lands back on that piece, that's probably I suppose the most important piece when we're sort of talking about obviously what is pro bono advice.
Yep. And it's quite interesting if we look at the couple of the benefits of giving advice, and particularly giving it from a pro bono perspective. It really does create a very different sense of community. If you think about what we're trying to do as part of the financial planning industry, we are wanting to create a sense of professionalism and work towards that sense of becoming a profession. So giving support to those that are particularly in a position of hardship and need some personal financial advice, it really does create that benefit, not only for ourselves from a higher level, from a professional aspect, but also helps those people that are really needing the advice at a point in time where they're going through a particularly difficult situation. And one of the interesting things of doing this, particularly if we're the advisor on this case, is it does improve our skills. It really helps us understand and learn those client care aspects that are so important for our jobs. And this in turn really does help benefit our mental health. If we think about all of the things that us as advisors have gone through, and also clients, it can, from a giving back perspective, positively increase our mental health. And that's such an important thing at the moment as we're going through so many of these very challenging things, and not only in life, but also in the profession.
I think you're right, Nicola, because I think volunteering on any level, and I think it's been proven time and time and again. At Volunteering Australia has come out with numerous reports. Those people that take the time to volunteer and join committees and do put back into the community do have a more positive aspect on their mental health.
They do, and that really does help bring that additional meaning that some of us are looking for in terms of what we're doing and giving back. And particularly if you're using your services to help change someone's life, it really can ignite that passion that we all have as financial planners.
I think it gives I know it gives a lot of endorphins. A lot of financial advisors actually do pro bono advice just because they get that endorphin hit, the adrenaline, they get that adrenaline rush, and for many people, giving back to and it might be clients, it might be referral of clients, or it might come in from a referral partner. But just to know that you've done something really, really good for somebody certainly is fantastic.
It is, isn't it? It's such a rewarding sense, and really does help bring that purpose back, particularly as we're in times of so many different things that are happening around the world. It's quite interesting when you also look at some of the reports that have done by ASIC and creating that sense of perspective in terms of what it is that we do within the financial planning profession. A lot of people, particularly when we look at this report here and look at what consumers really think about us, they don't necessarily understand a lot of what it is, and think that we, particularly as advisors, are expensive. And that can also create a perspective of people not necessarily getting or seeking advice when they need it the most. And a couple of the case studies that we've seen, particularly through the Pro Bono Advice Network, people have had this real preconceived idea about what it is that financial planners do and when to go see someone. So I think if we can, in the spirit of International Women's Day, challenge the bias that exists with that, I think it would be a really beneficial thing for all of us.
And on that survey, Nicola, I think those clients that were fortunate to receive pro bono advice, did they have a different conception, or did it change their preconceived ideas about financial advisors and the importance of financial advice?
I think so. From my direct experience with clients who have come, I've seen and talked to through the network, people have really changed their thoughts about what it is that financial planners do and how we can positively impact someone's life. It would be really interesting, and I don't think there's been any studies out there that have really specified how does people's experience of getting financial advice, particularly from a pro bono aspect, change their thought process. So maybe we could actually look at commissioning that maybe somewhere down the track.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it is, I think when we look at pro bono advice as a whole, it is something that is not just us as the advisors that need to really put our hands up and do it. It's this whole community that exists within the financial planning or sphere of how we work. So, you know, the practices out there, the professional bodies like the AFA that are involved with the Pro Bono Financial Advice Network, and also a lot of the community organisations that we interact with within the financial planning space. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on, particularly with some of the impacts from a positive side we've had with those community organisations.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. So I know a lot of people are here to listen to us talk about the Pro Bono Financial Advice Network, and as much as I know Stephen and I can talk a lot about the benefits of giving back, I know a lot of you are here to listen about how you can get involved with us and understand a little bit more about PFAN and what it is that we do and who we are.
Because I think it's fairly obvious that I think a lot of advisors, a lot of financial advisors in Australia actually do pro bono work from time to time. And sometimes that might just be once a year, sometimes it might be half a dozen times a year. But I think generally speaking, to certain degrees and to certain levels, many financial advisors do assist their client on a whole range of pro bono situations. But what obviously the PFAN network is to look at it and I suppose it systemize it and give opportunities for many people in the community that obviously don't have the opportunity to reach out to a financial advisor who may not know a financial advisor. So we'll take you through some of those examples over the course of this morning. Thanks, Nicola.
Exactly. And that's really who PFAN is we are here as more of a organisation to help facilitate those advisors that are out there wanting to give back to the community in a more kind of structured way, particularly as more and more people become in need of financial advice and not necessarily know where to turn. Our particular vision with PFAN and through the program is to help particularly Australians living with a personal health crisis who may not be able to afford advice, get access to advice, and those advisors that are willing to actually give back and look at providing that advice at no cost.
And Nicola, you mentioned just earlier International Women's Day, and I know the PFAN board has been focused on this particular event, but also obviously the recognition for women. Now, I think we all sort of can understand and know that a lot of women in particular find it very, very difficult to reach out and receive financial advice.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any sort of thoughts or stats on the particular issues that a lot of women have, and are we able to, I suppose, highlight that need through opportunities like International Women's Day?
I think there's a lot of statistics out there that really show the amount of people, and particularly when we focus on females, that do end up looking at insurance claims, for example, and also those that may not necessarily know where to start. I do know predominantly through a lot of the people that come through us and are impacted with a lot of the charity partners that we're working with are particularly predominantly female, unfortunately, and that does raise a huge amount of awareness, not necessarily from an advice perspective, but also the types of people that are suffering these hardships and need to go through it. Yeah, so I think as we dive into some of the key examples that we've seen, and we'll see some of those really actually quite staggering stats in terms of what it is that we do and how we can go, and who we help from that perspective. It's interesting if we look at what it is that we want to do from our specific advice perspective through the Pro Bono network. It is really helping improve Australians who are living with serious illness and disability, and encourage others to do that same. And I think when we start to see more and more of the need for advice of people that are going through illness and disability, we start looking at that perspective from a gender side of things, and how we can positively influence not only females that may be going through an illness, but a lot of the times they're the carers of people that have been impacted and have maybe children and so forth. So it is actually quite a broad ranging type of area that we look at.
And just on that too, Nicola, because obviously some financial advisors would feel very, very comfortable giving advice in relation to these areas, but there may be some financial advisors that might feel a little bit uncomfortable through their skill set or skill set or their experience.
Yep.
So I gather within our advice network, there's a way that we have identifying financial advisors who want to say give pro bono advice in different areas, and I will probably cover off on that a little bit later. But that's the case, Nicola?
That is correct. We don't want to match anyone with everyone, and we want to try and match advisors that have particular skill sets or interests with clients that are coming through the network. So if some examples that we've seen is people very specific around Centrelink and not necessarily wanting to provide advice around Centrelink or feeling comfortable to do so, we can make sure that they don't they end up with a client or a potential person coming through that's not necessarily going to be the area of focus. So at least we're utilising those skill sets from an advice perspective that we've got there. I think that's really important because we want to also make sure that we have a positive experience from both an advisor perspective, but then also a client perspective, and understanding those skills from an advisor and what a client needs is really important. It's interesting when we think about what it is that we do and how long the Pro Bono Financial Advice Network has been around. I'm sure a lot of you that are out there don't necessarily realise that PFAN's actually been around for not quite 10 years. This is a lovely picture here of one of our board members, Paul, back when PFAN started, and I have visions of a number of key people sitting around a campfire. Well, it did actually start in the Blue Mountains at a licensee summit. But a couple of people, after listening to a number of presentations around creating this professionalism, got together and started toying with the idea of creating an organisation that was of pro bono in nature and exactly what we do. So we have been around for close to 10 years, which is incredible.
And I think the AFA were on that journey pretty much from day one, Nicola.
Yes, they were. As you can see here, this is our current board and the beautiful team that we've got. And I know a number of the people here were part of the AFA at that point in time. And I know a number of them who may have been former AFA employees who have stuck around, like Natalie, who's here as well. But it's been great to see the team that we can see here with such a diverse range of skills and experience in different areas of the financial advice community that have been there since day one. So it's great to have this level of support. But in the words of one of our...
I was going to say, Nicola, you are, it's been fantastic. I've enjoyed my time on the board up until now, and having you as a chair, you're so enthusiastic and so committed to the PFAN cause, and your drive and enthusiasm is just contagious throughout the entire board. So thank you, so dearly.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. That's made my day. Thank you. I really do love, for the use of a better word, what it is that we do and what we're doing. And it's such a rewarding sense to give back and hear those beautiful client stories that we have around the positive impacts that we're making to people's lives. And this is ultimately what it is that we do. We all play that role that helps change people's lives, and it is something that's really important. If I'm going to use Niall's words that are up there on the screen, it's such an important role that we play as advisors to help support those that are going through challenging times, not only through hardship from an illness and disability, but other areas that we're starting to see now. So I think now, Stephen, is a really good time to talk about what it is in terms of the process that we have behind the scenes in the Pro Bono Financial Advice Network, and give some ideas around how people, how it looks from the referral process.
Yeah, for sure. And look, just a reminder also to the many advisors that are attending right around the country today, this is a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box on the bottom of your PC or tablet or mobile device, and not the chat function. And we'll try to get to obviously as many of those at the conclusion or close to the end of the session. Okay, so who is eligible? So Pro Bono or PFAN is eligible for pretty much all individuals who have been referred by PFAN partners. So what we've had to do is put some structure in place. And even with that structure in place, I know the board has been conscious that as soon as we hit that green button, that green go button, we didn't want to sort of be obviously overrun with applications, and that's applications from financial advisors, which is obviously good, but also applications from the general public. The worst case scenario would be we would have, let's say, too many applications and didn't have enough financial advisors in the financial advice network to give them to. So obviously we've put in place some fairly rigid guidelines, and we'll try to take you through those. So it's about helping individuals who are experiencing financial hardship, specifically obviously through a personal health crisis, or just individuals that require financial assistance. Now there's obviously a process that those individuals will go through in terms of filling out a financial assessment. Thanks, Nicola. So there's a referral process. So the individuals can fill in a form. That form is available, and we will have the links shown to you later. That form is available to be downloaded from the PFAN website itself, or there's also a link through the AFA website. Then that goes through to a support team. As part of that, obviously it goes through a process of checking, and then it can be allocated to a specific PFAN advisor. Obviously, one of our partners, TEL, is assisting us extensively on that process as well. Thanks, Nicola. So the people behind the scenes that are doing a tremendous amount of work in this area. So from an AFA perspective, in head office in Sydney, we have Will and also Greg. So Will and Greg both have expertise in running our membership program, and Will has got extremely good expertise in marketing as well, and it has also been a strength to PFAN in what he's been able to do. But from the TEL side, we've got Belinda over in my home city of Perth. We've got Mary up in Queensland. These four ladies obviously are all TEL BSOs. We've got Hannah in Melbourne looking after Victorian and Tasmanian advisors, and we've got Rachel in Sydney looking after New South Wales and ACT. And these 6 individuals are obviously trained up to understand the process and what goes on behind the scenes. Thanks, Nick. So how does it all work? So obviously, number one, we've got a pro bono client or an MS social worker contacts PFAN assisting for an advisor. Generally, that would be through the website, but also MS in itself has got systems which also help identify their people to actually get in touch with PFAN itself. The client completes an application form and sends it to PFAN for consideration. And obviously, in the background, as we've spoken, the TEL BSOs and the advisors seek willingness to commence that pro bono case. The TEL BSOs obtain advisor approval on taking on that pro bono client. It's important that, and I know we've spoken about it before, but it's important that the advisor understands what's involved, because many of these pro bono cases, some of them may actually be quite simple. Some of them may only require 3 or 4 hours advice work. Some of them may actually require an extensive amount of work, and obviously by no means does this excuse a financial advisor from any compliance issues whatsoever. You've still got to do your SOAs, you've still got to do your ROAs, and you've still got to follow the entire compliance process that is obviously common to all of us. So just because you're doing it for no reward or no financial reward, it's important to understand you've still got to go through your own internal and licensee processes. And then we go through the process of putting the financial advisor and the client together, and then basically the advisor's on his or her way in terms of assisting that client. At the end of the process, there's a survey which the advisor can complete, and there's also a survey for the client to complete as to how they experienced and were they satisfied with the entire process. Thanks, Nick.
So one of the really important things to note is the source of referrals that we're getting through the Pro Bono Financial Advice Network. And at the moment, we are having a large number of clients come through to us from MS Australia or MS Limited. Now, this is essentially a couple of different organisations spread across Australia and different states that work with those that have been diagnosed with MS. MS Limited looks after people that have been impacted through this disease in Victoria, Tasmania, ACT and New South Wales. And we've also got some referrals for those up in Queensland. So we're seeing quite a large number of clients coming through from these states, and that's predominantly where a lot of the advisors and assistance is really required. We also do have some arrangements in place with MS Australia, and that is the overarching organisation that assists these individual companies or charities within each state. Now, MS is an unfortunate disease that impacts people in a number of different ways that is completely unique. Not one person is the same in terms of their impact from an MS diagnosis, particularly because the lesions that are formed from this disease occur in different places on a person's brain. And that really can impact their functionality in so many different ways, but yet there are some common elements which are important to note, like fatigue and also things like physical disabilities that can impact people's mobilities. The I guess concerning thing, if we're looking at this from a financial perspective, is it can occur at any age, although it predominantly impacts people who are slightly younger or in their 30s, maybe up to 40s, but it doesn't impact someone's lifespan. It just impacts their quality of life sometime. So this is really important when we're looking at that financial well-being, and if someone's got claims and so forth, we still have to take that into account.
And Nicola, I know we have spoken about it at a board level before, but MS unfortunately does have a higher impact on the female gender. Is that correct?
That's completely correct. Predominantly, it's I don't know the specific numbers off the top of my head, but it is predominantly females. I want to say 3/4 of those with MS are females, and it does impact those that are within their 30s and 40s. It doesn't necessarily impact the older male, but it does happen, and that's the case that I've seen, particularly from my own experience with my father. He is the reason why I'm so passionate predominantly about what we do, because of his impact through MS, and he was diagnosed when he was later and didn't really quite fit that box. But it can, I guess the point is to be aware that it does impact everyone, but we don't necessarily see that from a statistical perspective. I think one of the interesting things is it's also linked to certain things in terms of, there's things around vitamin D and so forth, but the cause is really unknown at this stage. But I know predominantly through the work that we get and the referrals that we have through MS, and a lot of them do come from a couple of the support workers that are employed by MS Limited. And Michael, who you can see in this picture, is one of those lovely support workers. I'm very fortunate to have learnt a lot from him and Catherine, who are behind the scenes here in Victoria, and given us a lot of insight as to how we can help those clients coming through to the Pro Bono Advice Network that have been impacted with MS, and some of the things that they see with their day-to-day job. And this really helps give us some tips around how you as a pro bono financial advisor can really help with providing support to a client.
Yeah, Nicola, I was going to say, and obviously it goes without saying, but for many people who haven't experienced or had the opportunity of meeting somebody with MS, obviously it is a debilitating disease, but it also it compacts over time. What on the patient, what impacts on the patient after year 1 is going to be different to the impact on a patient after year 5. And so on and so on. So it's important that, you know, we respect these patients and obviously ultimately our clients, that they're obviously all human, and it just needs that little bit of extra care sometimes, because many of these people obviously have been through a lot, and MS has turned their life upside down. So they need just that little bit of extra care when there's sort of you go through. So as we all know as financial advisors, that process of explaining the financial advice piece when we're in front of our clients, and that process in explaining all the information that's in a statement of advice can actually baffle clients, and we actually sometimes have to dumb down that process. And I think that's very important, because we've got to do what's obviously in the client's best interests, but especially with this process, we just need to actually take it a little bit slowly as we sort of go through that situation with those clients. Obviously, there's issues such as homelessness, the reliance on Centrelink, and we've spoken before about the mental health impacts. Thanks very much, Nick. So I've spoken about the importance of taking it a little bit slower when we're going through this, and delivering that advice sometimes in smaller chunks, and perhaps just some of the important pieces as a financial advisor that you believe the client should know and will want to know, highlighting those on the advice document. Even adding some colour into the SOA for those important pieces there that you want to bring to the client's attention is important. Obviously, as a financial advisor, we always, it's important to make all your notes, but follow everything up by email. You might sit down and explain to somebody with MS what they need to do, and then even after a week, they might have actually forgotten what you've spoken about because of the situations with the disease. So it's important that you document those discussions and the actions, items, and the outcomes in an email. And obviously there are, like yourself, you're operating in a pro bono role as a financial advisor, but it's important that you recognise that these individuals may also need other external support, whether it's occupational support or a lot of mental health situations, and there are obviously quite a number of agencies. Obviously, you know, many of us would be aware of Beyond Blue and Lifeline for some of those ones requiring mental health support. Thanks, Nicola.
And I think a number of those tips have really shone through some of the work I've specifically done from an advisor perspective. Laura, who is here with her lovely little dog, she is one of the clients that I was fortunate enough to assist through PFAN. Now, she is the type of person that wouldn't have come and got advice if it wasn't for us. And the reason I say that is because when she came to see me, she only had $40,000 in her bank account. She had stopped work because of her MS. She found the ability to sit in front of a computer quite draining, and really suffered from symptoms such as cognitive fatigue. So, for example, she'd probably be asleep after halfway through this webinar purely because of the ability concentrate. So she came to us purely because she wanted to know what to do with her home. She had taken on a mortgage, she couldn't fund the mortgage repayments, and it was really that catch-22 of, do I sell my home or not? And what are the options if I sell my home? One of the things that she didn't realise was a TPD policy through her superannuation fund. And after some initial investigations that I completed, I was in a positive position where I could say to her, you have this TPD policy that is going to pay out, and did, her complete mortgage. And that meant she didn't have to make a decision around moving out of her home. Now, if you think about that scenario, someone wouldn't call up an advisor and say, hey, I've got $40,000 in my bank, what do I do? The perception of the cost that it is that we charge on a day-to-day basis would have completely prohibited that. But the outcome would have been so different if we didn't have the ability to sit down and talk to her through the network. That essentially would have meant she probably would have lost the insurance purely because of lack of understanding and lack of contributing into her fund. And that would have meant she may have ended up selling her home and things like that. So really changed the course of her life. The other really neat example I have is, this is a very different situation where a lady came to me because she was so concerned about an inheritance that she had received or was going to receive that impacted her disability support pension. Now, she came to us because it was that sense of community, who is it that I can trust and go to in order to get advice. And she was in a very different situation because of her inheritance essentially meant that she was ineligible for the pension, even though we know a lot of clients can get upset about losing that, but the inheritance meant we could create an income stream for her. One of the key things that was really of important note with this lady is her cognitive impact from an attention span perspective, and trying to understand complex financial situations. They had to be broken down into really bite-sized pieces. I was very fortunate, and she was very fortunate to also have her son as her support person. That's also held a power of attorney. So between the son and myself, we could convey a large number of complicated financial situations to her. But it goes to show, between these two different examples, the types of clients that we can see. And there are such a range of different people. But if you think about a lot of the likelihood of the cases that we will see, it's fundamentally due to people looking at that insurance space. And this is actually a really interesting stat here that Stephen's going to go through around some of the information we found out.
Yeah, thanks very much, Nicola. So Noel McConnell from TEL, who obviously sits on the board, was able to dig out these stats and spent some months actually going through the TEL records to actually achieve these, and was able to obviously separate the group situation. So this is just advisor focused business. I was actually, I suppose, surprised when I looked at the TPD figure. A lot of advisors aren't as exposed in TPD claims as they are with, say, income protection or trauma or even possibly death claims. And for many advisors, they don't actually for whatever reason, have an opportunity to be involved in the TPD side. But certainly from a TPD side, it goes to show you that MS is actually making up a significant number of claims. So this is just MS claims. over the last 5 years, broken up across those 4 categories. Now, 65% of those claimants that suffer MS, unfortunately, are female. But when we actually then overlaid that in terms of the gender situation of males and females applying for cover, females only equate to, and the figure is approximate, but the approximate figure is about 40%. So in actual fact, when you actually cast that layer over, the significance of female claimants becomes ever more prevalent. So yeah, I was quite shocked when I looked at those stats. Thanks, Nick.
One of our goals, particularly with the Pro Bono Financial Advice Network, is not to just limit ourselves to those diagnosed with MS. Our goal is to increase the level of services that we provide to other organisations and communities, and that's predominantly where we need assistance from those of you that are listening today and may want to get involved. Is the more advisors that we have within our network, it means that the less we will have to do, and ultimately, if each advisor that existed in the profession today did one case a year, we would be able to cover multiple types of communities and organisations that have been impacted by a disability. So that's our overarching ambition, is to really help those communities and get all those advisors out there that want to give back on board. So while we do have a focus predominantly from MS, it is not the end of what we want to do.
And Nicola, I know of one particular advisor. He's an elderly advisor, and all he actually does is pro bono advice, and he probably does about 4 sets over any 12-month period. And so he actually doesn't earn, other than he's probably got his book of clients. But in terms of new advice or new client offerings, he does about 4 pro bono offerings for potential clients over the course of a year. And it's actually ironic, obviously, because he's paying the ASIC fees, the advisor service and regulatory fees, and all the other fees and professional indemnity, just to actually cover off on that pro bono advice. So, but it actually makes him feel really, really good as an individual. And I think it's about giving back to obviously many people in the community, and giving back to his profession, who obviously, which has obviously helped him, through the course of his life. Mm. So how to get involved? So as advisors, we're hoping as many advisors can possible can sort of have a think about what Nicola and I have sort of gone through this morning. And if it is of interest to you, please, if you could reach out and register using the PFAN website. I know many of you will still prefer to perhaps offer the pro bono service just on the side, or the way you've been perhaps doing it in the past. You can actually still do that by also just registering as a PFAN advisor. We're wanting to try and, I suppose, capture many of those lost opportunities, many of those lost stories, which obviously can go into folklore, but at the end of the day, we do know that they're out there. But the only way to actually do this properly is to actually do it through the PFAN Advice Network. Thanks, Nicola. So we're coming to the end of our session. Question and answers. Have we got any? So Mel, it doesn't appear we've got too many Q&As that I can see.
No, I can't see any either.
All right. So look, I'd like to thank all the advisors, and And obviously my partner in crime, Nicola, current chair of the PFAN board. Nicola, thanks honestly for all your work and dedication to PFAN and everything that you've done for the pro bono cause right across Australia. I'd like to thank all the advisors, all the AFA members that have obviously zoomed in and joined us virtually across Australia, and hopefully everybody's going to have a good day. And we'll end. Any last words, Nicola?
We do have a no Q&A. No, I'd like to say thank you, Stephen, to my partner in crime as well, for being part of the board and representing the AFA. It's fabulous to have yourself and the support of the AFA behind us in order to achieve this goal of helping those that really need it. It's an absolute pleasure, not only being in my position, but hearing those positive differences that we're making, and allowing the opportunity and having this opportunity to talk about what it is that we do and promote the good work that we do as advisors. So thank you to yourself, and thank you to the AFA team for having us. And please reach out if anyone has any questions. Love to hear.
Yeah, thanks very much, Nicola. So Mel, I think we'll stop the recording there. Thanks very much, Mel.